So I want to reflect on Jesus's parting words, part of his farewell discourse that we heard in that gospel passage. And I've been thinking about it myself this week because I've had a growing sense for myself of a whole series of things that just seem too big, too difficult for me to do. Things that I'm obviously being asked to do, that God is therefore asking me to do. So, you've probably heard by now that I'm moving, so I'm having to figure out how to pack, figuring out how to travel amidst the lockdown. And I've got to write not one new course, but 3 completely new courses, and all kinds of other things too. And it all seems too much. But then as I was thinking of that and reading today's gospel, I remembered how I'm supposed to face them, how we're supposed to face everything in life. Because in today's gospel, you might well say, Jesus commands us to do something that is seemingly beyond us, but he gives us a promise that makes it possible. So today's gospel, as I said, it's part of his farewell discourse. This is what he said at the Last Supper before he went to die. It includes his last request, what we might call his last will and testament, that he was going off to die. And what did he ask before he died? What was his last request? Well, as we heard in that text, it was, if you love me, keep my commandments. Now, what are his commandments? Well, there are many commandments he gives us. There's some people that talk as if Jesus didn't have anything he asked of us, but no, there is a moral content to the gospel. But the heart of it, we didn't hear in today's passage, but is also within that farewell discourse. He said, love one another as I have loved you. And in this text, at the very moment when he's asking us to keep his commandments, with this request, he promised to send his Holy Spirit, the helper, the advocate. So the point I want to make to you today is that God asks of us great things. He asks of us difficult things. Difficult things like the command to love. Difficult things like to move in the midst of a lockdown. But he never asks us to do something without giving us the capacity to do it. And the clearest sign of that is his promise to give his Holy Spirit. So the command to love is something simply said. But living it out, to live out love, is a difficult thing. Even if we might think, well, I'm just living by myself, there's not much to do. Well, actually, to live love, we're still called to do. Even if we're alone, even in the lockdown, we've got just one other person in the house. What does love look like? Well, St. Paul says, love is patient. So amidst the boredom, amidst the maybe frustration of being by myself, frustration with my situation, frustration with that one other person I'm with, well, to be patient. Love is patient. Love is considerate. Love doesn't think of itself first. So to think of others in love. That in this lockdown, it's very easy to live in fear. A lot of you that I've been talking to, we can have this fear within us that the media they've kind of got nothing else to say. So they're just talking about the problems, and it's easy to be in fear. But if we're in fear, we're not in love. Because fear is focused on ourselves, and sometimes rightly on things that concern our health. But love is focused on the other. And then, if I'm by myself or with just a couple others, well, how can I love? Well, prayer. I can remember to pray for others, pray for the others that I'm not with now, that I do good for them by praying for them. Even if there's maybe nothing around me physically to remind me of them because I'm not seeing them, but all the more valuable to remember them in prayer and to love them in that way. So how are we called to love others? Well, often love is expressed, as we know, in small, unexciting details. But it's how we behave in those details that shows our love. And I feel at the moment that, I've got some big challenges coming up, but it's how I behave in the little challenges that determines who I am. That love is tough, and I can't do it alone. I can't do it by my own power. But I can with him, with his power, with the Holy Spirit that he promises to send. So to sum that all up, that maybe the tedious small details of living in the lockdown has seemed too much for you this week. Or maybe the weight of a particular crisis or problem seems too much, and you quake in fear about whether you can cope with it. But alone, we can't cope, but with him, we can. And remember, this command to love is his last request. He asks us to love, to do all the small and the big things in love that are part of love. And although he asks much, it's possible because he promises even more than he asks. He promises a thing not outside of himself, but his very self, his Holy Spirit, the advocate, the helper, to enable us to do what we cannot do.